What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Speaking Sessions podcast. I've got another speaking coach in the house with me. So, yes, you are in for double the trouble. Shelley Goldstein is a keynote speaker and corporate trainer with over 30 years of senior level management, entrepreneurship, marketing, and design expertise. Shelley trains global audiences how to powerfully command executive presence and master the art of effective speaking. She understands the demands of evolving workplace with its increased emphasis on communication skills and leadership influence, and has helped hundreds of people in over 40 countries across a wide variety of industries develop the skills necessary to empowering remarkable speakers and lead with more impact. Shelley shares her expertise as a frequent podcast guest, speaker, and presenter, and member of the National Speakers Association, also known as NSA. In addition, she leads interactive webinars and corporate training and is a gold tier facilitator for Google's I Am Remarkable global initiative. And today we're going to talk about how to command executive presence as well as command any room that you go into. Before we get into what we're going to talk about today, Shelley, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Philip, really good to be here. I think it's going to be a fun conversation.
I agree. This is going to be a lot of fun. I know we've had some conversations beforehand and everything. Was really excited to get you on, seeing the things that you're doing to help corporations get better at speaking. And that's my endeavor as well, to help more corporations as well, because I mean, we said in your bio, communication is something that really everybody needs, but I feel corporations, well, really everybody, but corporations struggle with this because of how vast the company can get and how many levels there are within the company. And then you go global too, and now you've got different ethnicities, you've got different backgrounds of people, and now you've got to figure out how to come together, and not to mention language barrier as well. English as a second language or even a third language for some countries and everything. And how do you, especially as an American trying to speak with other countries, how do you go about making sure they understand that without assuming that they understand every little joke you may say or every little word that you're sharing, or you're just speaking very fast, even though it's the normal speed for you. So tell us a little bit more about yourself before we really dive in.
Gee, I think one of the most incredible things that I learned is I am my first client. And I kind of got that from another coach I spoke to years ago. And I told her, I said, do you mind if I just grab that or borrow that? Because it's so true. When we think about how we get started in our fields, some of us were that person. I certainly, and to this day, I still get nervous. You even mentioned you were sort of tripping up, and that's okay. That makes us human. And I think it's important because understanding the process, understanding that feeling and remembering what it was like as a new speaker, that helps me connect with my clients and others to understand that process. It's not just teach. It's always remember what it's like to be a student. And we all start somewhere.
Man, that's such a great point. Like two things there. One, I love the idea about we're our first client for sure, because I can think about that with the series I'm working on for an automotive company right now. And that's how it's been for me. How do I present myself to management? How do I present myself as an expert, being an engineer, to other non-engineers, especially, but even other engineers that don't have the background like me? And then how do I get paid more inside a corporation and everything? So that's actually one of the series that I'm working on right now with them, which is really neat. But then the other side to that, not being this perfect speaker as well, and really with social media, us being speaking coaches, we show these things and it looks like, oh wow, Shelley and Philip, they're great speakers, they're always going speaking places, they're doing all these trainings. But we started where a lot of our clients were at, or they're at now. We started there too, where we couldn't speak well. We didn't know how to articulate our messages, and we still mess up here. It's still kind of fumbling on my words a little bit, but it happens. We're humans. You never know why something may be happening, but yeah, we're all humans. And that's something that I've noticed too. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this, but as you've been to events before, conferences, whether it be in person, virtual, whatever, you see these speakers that they're well-known speakers, but then you're a little shocked because you would think somebody that's so well known would be like 100% polished, would never make a mistake or anything like that. And yet they're like everybody else, and they make mistakes here and there. Nothing against them, but they're human. And so I'd love to hear kind of your input on that, because we see these people on stages that are doing amazing with speaking, or even on social media where they have amazing videos and they sound so eloquent, and yet you see them in person, it's like, oh, they're just like me. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's true. We're all very much alike, and we all share a lot of the same challenges when it comes to speaking. I actually encourage mistakes. There is science that shows when we err, when we fault, we come across actually more confident and more trusting to our audiences. There's nothing wrong with being polished, knowing your material. That's totally great. And you can edit videos to cut out mistakes, and that's fine too. But if you do make mistakes in video or in person, again, it's showing that you're okay to be honest with, I don't know something, or I messed up, and use it as a joke within your material. The audience tends to trust somebody who's more honest, even in mistakes, than they would be telling us something that wasn't true.
Yeah.
So it actually is a good thing. And it's, talk about executive presence. You can command an audience and show confidence when you are okay with being imperfect.
Yeah. And not to go into politics, but I think about Vivek right now. And that's one of the things I hear from everybody is like, man, he is an excellent speaker, but it's like he's so polished. I'm just not sure. And it's because of him being such a good speaker. And I'm not going to say, hey, he's right, he's wrong. But because of him being so polished as a speaker, it gets people questioning, like, is he really who he is? Is he really telling us the truth? Which really goes to your point that we can gain the confidence of our audience when we're not completely perfect. And that's not to say we shouldn't strive to be perfect, but yes, having some of those human fallacies in us where we make those little mistakes is actually a good thing, because it brings us back down to more reality, something that they can relate to, they being the audience and everything.
Well, you bring up a good point. Politics in general, as marketers too. So there's marketing, there's politics, there's different industries where we need to repeat certain calls to action, talking points. Nothing wrong with that. However, to your point, it's when we bring in our humanness, when we get to something that we connect to on a personal level, and we help support that talking point, that fact, that quote, it certainly does drive it home as being more personable. And to your point, and your personal approach here is saying, wow, I don't know if I trust that person. So maybe that's something that would help you understand and trust that person, that personal point over a talking point.
Yeah, which I think is such a beautiful thing, because I've had people come to me before like, okay, well, you say share your story, but what story do I share? Like, I've got a long life. I've lived 30, 40, 50, 60 years. I can't share that whole thing on stage. That would take me longer than an hour for sure. And I always tell people, share the part of your story that, one, relates with the point that you're trying to make, and then two, if you can, relates with the audience. Is when you can do those two things, that's the part of the story that they actually care to hear about, because it makes sense with what you're trying to say, and then relates with them as well. It helps you relate with each other, which goes to the personable thing that you were talking about.
But, yeah, I mean, giving us too much information isn't good either, right? Just pick something, stick to it, and yes, make it relatable, of course.
Yeah, for sure. And so let's go to this commanding executive presence, and I want to break this down in two ways, because I think when I think about commanding executive presence, I think about being somebody who's not an executive and speaking up to the executives So I want to go that route first, and then afterwards I want to flip it, and let's look at an executive and how do they not talk down, but how do they talk on the same level to people in the company? Because I think this is such a contrast that happens within companies, and it is a fine balance. You have to figure that out as being the, we'll call them the professional, trying to speak up to the executives. It's that there is this barrier. There are these different levels in the political spectrum there. But then as the executive, how do you talk to the people that are beneath you on the ladder, but not talk down to them, and then also not show favoritism if you're not talking to everybody as well? But I would love to hear kind of like what commanding executive presence looks like to you.
Well, it's interesting. It's a term that some people don't even understand what it means. I've had people say, what does that mean? Yet the majority of my clients and even prospects say they want, as a goal in speaking, they want to achieve executive presence. My personal point of view is, in an organization, we have executives. They're typically the C-suite, the entrepreneurs, the owners, the leaders. If we consider that label as an executive, then the next step is, what is the characteristics of that executive? Mm. And we all have different interpretations, perceptions of what a leader might be or what we want them to be. It isn't necessarily who they are. So the perception of executive presence is a leader, and let's assume a good one who can take us into the future. But does that mean they're listening to our problems? Does that mean they're engaging the whole organization as a whole to move forward? Are they out for themselves? Are they out for the people? So those are very subtle. You start getting into the characteristics and the details, and you might, or at least I've been surprised to find that the most successful entrepreneurs, I work with people that are worth hundreds of millions. They are terrified to speak.
I want to put a little emphasis on that real quick, because like a lot of people think, yeah, you get this success and like, oh, everything's just good, everything's okay, you're super confident. No, and I've seen that too, where, and it almost seems like the more success they get, the more nervous they get because they feel like they're supposed to be this person that they're really not.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it doesn't matter where you're at. People are afraid to speak.
Exactly.
So speak anyways.
Exactly. And it goes back to our inner dialogue. Mm. What we're telling ourselves, is that true? I mentioned the word perception. How are we perceiving it? And is that really what others are thinking too in the room? I believe most of us just want to get along. We just want to communicate well. And a great leader is somebody who listens to people, engages in different, conversations to say, can I help you be more expressive, more creative? And those things change with leaders. Leaders are different as much as the supporting staff. What can everybody offer, and how can we maximize their skills to really make it a great company? Great leaders know what their weaknesses are and their fallbacks as well as their strengths, and they can involve others to participate. It's communication, and it's being okay, back to our earlier conversation, that we're not perfect, that we're not a series of talking points. I mean, human failure, mistakes, is how we innovate. We would not have landed on the moon and heading back if we didn't make mistakes. We would not have found cures for penicillin and other medicines if it weren't for trial and error, mistakes. We wouldn't be flying in airplanes, let alone the moon. People were trying out aviation for decades before we actually took off on the ground. But it was mistake after mistake after mistake. And if we can embrace that as a positive thing and make that perhaps a characteristic of leadership, of executive presence, honesty, and being okay with that, and encouraging others to say, make a mistake because we will innovate more. I think the conversations at organizations, talking to different levels of support staff, might actually improve.
Yeah. And I can see where that can be really scary, especially for those that are doing the work and making a mistake, because you don't know how the executives are going to react to that. And then when you're looking at some of these larger companies, I mean, there's a lot of zeros behind these projects that they're working on. And when you talk in the company's money, it's like, oh, I mean, yeah, whatever. It's a couple million for that. No big deal. But if it was my money, it's like, that's a couple million. I can't fathom that. And so it's definitely something that's difficult to think about. And not that we should be careless and be like, oh, yeah, it's just like it's like $1 million. This is a multi-billion-dollar business. Who cares? It's just a million. Like, no, we shouldn't be that way. But we should be trying something, and like, hey, look, this is what I was trying to do. Yeah, it didn't work out, but we were trying this. We looked at it, and that's where really that communication comes in, that we wanted to try this. This was our idea, and really, I guess, getting that approval really just to make sure to cover your butt at the end of the day there, but really communicating that, because you're right, innovation happens through failure. A lot of entrepreneurs I talk to, that's one of the things we talk about, like, hey, you took an L. It wasn't a loss. It was a lesson. The only way it was a loss was if you decided, I'm no longer doing that anymore. Like, you just give up completely. Then yes, it's a loss. But if you tried something, you failed, it was a lesson learned. It was not a loss by any means. And that's how we really need to look at that and really communicate that more, especially executives need to communicate that throughout the team, even to other executives. Is when it's not our area of expertise, we're afraid of failure.
So in the discussion about executive presence, perhaps an approach to it, as opposed to being perfect, would be to be inspiring, to create that safe space where people can explore and experiment. And you're right, you don't want to carelessly make mistakes. However, almost every interview includes one question about mistakes. They'll ask almost every single interview, what failures have you made? Or where have you failed in an organization? Or what mistakes have you made? They're not asking you to trip you up. And there's a reason that question is in there. The answer is they want to understand your thinking process of how you can overcome that, what you've learned and how you turned it into a success. Because that's how the process works. So if they're asking that question, they know there's a characteristic within you that's going to be able to help not encourage mistakes, but encourage exploration and be okay how to address something quickly, maybe even be proactive, see it coming, and then quickly pivot. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And executive presence is really about character and inspiring others to move forward.
And so how can we build that? Maybe we don't have that character and we're not that inspiring person to help move things forward and encourage an environment of growth and trial and error. How can we start to build that within ourselves so we can have that executive presence for ourselves?
Well, that's an interesting question, because you're right. Not everybody wants that particular position or feels comfortable in that area. However, I do believe there are leaders at every level. And whether you're the frontline person, say, customer service, you're representing the entire brand. That's probably one of the most important people in your organization, because that's the first contact a customer, an outside person, has within your organization. And that could set the tone for how the sales process is going to be, how engaging with your organization is going to be, how doing business with your organization is going to be. So that person on the front line, sales, customer service, that's a good place to even say, well, how can I be a leader at this capacity? And maybe it's just listening to the clients. Maybe it's sharing some really important, relevant stories and information. If we dig into that as a conversation one-on-one, that could be motivation and inspiration and executive leadership. I'm the best customer service rep. I'm the best salesperson because I'm hearing what the other party is asking me about. I understand their problems. And just sharing those moments of, well, we had a customer example, da 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 da, who went through that, shows a relationship. That's executive presence at that level, any level.
Yeah, and I like that you broke it down that way. It's not literally, well, because of course, when I thought of executive presence, I'm thinking the literal executives. But yeah, that executive presence being more than that, being somebody that's going to inspire somebody to do more. And so we can all have that no matter what level we're at, for sure. I like that a lot. And so let's transition a little bit. So executive presence, but then with that usually comes like commanding rooms. And as somebody that has that leadership title, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company comes in, you're going to look, or you see the president or the governor or the mayor, they come in, oh yeah, or you name it, some famous person, they come in the room, they automatically command it because, well, one, you don't normally see those people, and two, everybody knows them and they want to be able to hear what they have to say and be able to pay attention to them. So they clearly command a room very easily. They get that attention. But when it's a quote unquote normal person, how do we go about commanding rooms that we go into? Because I think this is a skill that's learned over time, but I think it's still something that's valuable for us as a person, as a speaker, to be able to do. So how do you go about commanding rooms?
Well, it's really interesting because I would hope that those people that walk into a room and command at every level are normal. I mean, what's normal? Who's defining normal? The normal feeling is to feel uncomfortable or comfortable. So perhaps that person who can command presence, and Adam Grant says this very well to some effect, that you want to be the most interested person in the room versus the most interesting. When you're interesting, trying hard to have the answers, trying hard to be perfect, trying to know it all and demand the presence in the room, it falls flat because it doesn't feel authentic. But when you're approaching a situation, even a speech to an audience, and you're coming as if, I want to know about you. Is this how you feel? Are we sharing these ideas? That's where the command comes from. It's almost organic in a sense because you're sharing a little bit of vulnerability. You're sharing the idea you're okay with that. And again, you're really interested in what your audience is going through, talking with people as opposed to at them. And you can do them in a speech-like scenario. So when we think about great leaders that we know, the Steve Jobs, people that are experts that come into a room, they're really good at just connecting and letting us know they know how we feel. Yeah. And that command is almost just an organic push.
Oh, I like that. I agree with that. And I'll add to it. I feel like when people can tell your intentions, and we've heard of the term commission breath. When people know you're coming in just to sell them, you're not there actually trying to help solve their problem or even just see like, hey, do they actually even need me or not? You're just there just to sell them on your product or service. They can feel that. And I just feel gross. But when you come into a room and you're there just to pour into others, if you're a speaker or if you're just a person that wants to listen into what other people have to say and value their opinion, people feel that as well. And it's just really this aura almost. And when we think of commanding a room, I think a lot of people mistake it for like, hey, you do this and you do that. And like you're more demanding people what to do, and you're pointing fingers and you're leading and getting people. That's almost like you're orchestrating something to happen. But in my opinion, it sounds like same for you. It's more about your presence. And that for me, that's what it is. Your presence is what really commands that room because of who you are. You put off this energy that people can't help but like look at you. And I know I've been in rooms before where, I mean, the person was behind me, and all of a sudden I just kind of felt something. I'm like, and I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I know who that is, or like, who is that? You get really intrigued by that. And that to me is what that commanding the room is. It's not,
Yeah.
yeah, literally you have to be talking, telling people what to do, but just being in that room is how you get that presence. And to me, to get to where you can command rooms is by putting yourself in a mindset where it's about delivering value. It's about helping people. It's about listening to others and not being about yourself, being self-absorbed.
Yes, and in the same way, a self-promotion without being self-absorbed or boasting is to own your stories.
Yeah.
Share the stories of yourself, or your experiences with the team, or working for other organizations, and being confident in that, like, oh, I went through this and it was really interesting. That's, if you think about a scenario where you're in a social situation of people that you know really well, like old college friends or something, you're really relaxed because you spent so much time. You can be yourself. You don't feel like you have to try to put on an air. You can just share fun moments and stories, and it's okay. That's where every conversation can be. Now, we have to be a little, discerning as to what's appropriate for different situations, but it's that level of just knowing I could be myself, I could share and express ideas, and others, whether you're whatever label you have in the organization, just being that person to let the other one know it's okay. It's a safe space to share. And that gives you that presence and that grounding and curiosity to want to know what's happening with the other person. How did they start? Where did they come from? What was their journey like?
I like that. And so I want to transition this a little bit. So commanding a room, and we're just using room in general, but let's use an example. So especially corporation, I know you do a lot of corporate training. I do corporate training as well. For those that maybe they're not that executive, but they've got to come in and present to, let's say, the boardroom, how can they come in there and have this really commanding presence and be able to come into this room with these executives and not be like, all right, well, here's another person coming in to do a speech or to pitch us on something else so we can give them approval. How can they come in that room and command that room? What are some tips that you would give them?
Well, some great tips. If you have a prepared speech or presentation, it's a great idea to show up early and introduce yourself. Just meet the people that are going to be in the audience, network, find out who they are, what brings them there today, where they flew in from, or what they ate for dinner last night, a fabulous restaurant in town, whatever it is. It could be a light icebreaker. Just get to kind of mingle and know a little bit of the room. So by the time you get into that place where the spotlight, so to speak, is on you, you actually know some of the people, and you can actually engage with them and use that within your presentation. Because again, the idea, the mindset that you're having a conversation and you're connecting with the people in the room is that first step of getting there early and networking.
I like that. Yeah, networking, getting to know them. I've got a friend that he's a great public speaker, and that's one of the things he likes to do when he goes to get on stages is he'll go around and talk with people, and then in his speech, he'll use some of that, what they've said and everything, to relate with them. And I like to do that same thing where I'll say something, or I might point at somebody in the audience and mention something about them. And especially, this probably work better for a guy to a guy because we're always giving each other a hard time. It seems like good guy friends, that's all they do. They rag each other in person and they praise them behind their backs. Why we do that, I don't know. But if you're a guy presenting to, especially if it's a room full of other male executives, or you want to particular point out like one just to kind of give them a hard time, I think that could work. Now, from a woman to a man, that might not work as well. It depends on the relationship and how you do it there. But from a guy to guy, typically you can kind of say something a little bit, and I can't give you a great example, but you might be able to point something out and it'd be okay. Even if the sex doesn't really matter there at the end of the day, as long as it makes some sense. But typically man to man, you can kind of do a little bit more razzing per se, just because that's the nature of men with other men. But that's based on something you've had knowledge about beforehand and everything. And then I would say the other thing too, we think when we go in these meetings, we've got to be like super stiff and everything's got to be, okay, here's what it is. Here's clear cut. But have a little joke in there. Like you said at the beginning, like liven up the room, ask them some questions or bring something up about what you talked about their favorite restaurant and everything. They hear this same thing all the time. So if you want to be a little bit different as well, have some kind of joke that it needs to relate with your speech or your presentation, but have something in there that'll make them laugh a little bit instead of, hey, here's what we got today. What do you think? Okay, thank you. Like that's boring. So that's something else you can do to help command that room.
Yeah, I mean, I really have to say labels are what hold us back. I mean, you just talked about this whole thing, guy to guy. You know, what the heck does that mean? I mean, we're humans. And if we take down the labels, whether you're the CEO, you're the frontline customer service, or whatever your sexual preference is, or whatever your identity is, if we take those labels away, if we close our eyes and stand in a room and just speak to the energy and the people about a particular topic, how much more open can we be? How much more understanding will they be? Because the truth is, I've had male executives come to me and feel they have tremendous pressure from women that feel they're not getting a break. And I have women coming to me saying they don't feel they get a break because the men are commanding in this area. And then there are these gender neutral people that come into the room and they feel they're misunderstood. And when I bring that up in a conversation to say, we all feel like we're misunderstood no matter what pocket or space we live in. And what if we realize the people in the room, wherever they're coming from, all feel the same sense of nervousness, a level of what I have to say isn't important. Somebody else is putting me up on a higher level and has a higher expectation. Okay, great. Let's strip down the expectations and get it. We're all feeling nervous. Well, maybe that changes the whole approach. Certainly brings down the stress level because you realize that other person's just like me. And it's that inner dialogue of saying, you know what? Is that really true? And again, when you realize that some of the highest, most successful executives in the world have a fear of speaking, just like a college student, there's a good place to start from ease and talk about presence and just like, okay, we're in this. And yes, add a little joke, make it a little humorous. Most people in the room feel the way you do, believe it or not. It's just a perception.
And that's a great point. And I stand corrected on my statement about, just male to male, whatever there. So, but yeah, so I stand corrected there. I appreciate you bringing that point out because you're right. And we do. And I just did it there earlier where we put up this certain perception that's really there that's probably not there at all. And as long as we're trying to come at it not from that place of perception, so we'll just say sexist, like, then as long as we're just trying to treat a person like a person, no matter what their sex happens to be, then you're right. It should. I mean, and everybody, because of their own perceptions, they may perceive it one way, but I think kind of what we've been talking about with who you are as a person will come out. And then if somebody is perceiving a certain way that came off the wrong way, you definitely need to figure out what works best for you overall and be who you are. And then that will come to light in the end. So if something bad does happen, other people will say, well, one, I didn't see that, or no, that's never how Philip or Shelly has ever been. So, I mean, what are you talking about? Have you talked with them about that? So I appreciate you bringing that point out. You're right. Yeah, we do have those perceptions on things for sure. We need to bring those perceptions on, or just really get rid of them, not just bring them down, but get rid of them completely and just speak like we're speaking to a normal person. Or normal, well, I know we've used normal, but quote unquote normal.
Data analyst to data analyst. Yeah. They typically have a lot of similarities in their job responsibility or the approach of, or a doctor in a specialty, say, a podiatrist. all podiatrists kind of understand very generally speaking, a similar area. So just start from that point and move forward. You have a lot in common without anything else added into the mix.
Yeah. Great point. So I know we're kind of running out of time here, but I wanted us to be able to just kind of, is there like one last tidbit that you can give us as far as like executive presence when it comes to that? Just kind of going back to that real quick, any things that we can do to help ourselves have that executive presence?
Yeah, don't try so hard. Just be curious. Go into a room and be curious about the people that are there before you. And when we ask more questions than deliver answers, we actually have more of an interaction, and the energy of nervousness turns into excitement and curiosity. And you will, by that alone, have a presence that feels confident and executive-like by definition.
Wow, I like it. Well, Shelly, I want to come to our last question here that I like to ask most of our guests, and that is, if you could only share one message for the rest of your life, what would that message be?
One message for the rest of my
I know. I'm asking a lot out of a speaking coach. I had a communication coach on a while back, and she was the same way. She's like, "Really? That's what you got to do to me?" So,
good question. It's really thought-provoking, and it definitely, I'm like, where do I go with this? I'll leave with this. Take time to stop and smell the flowers. Observe everything that's around you. In a conversation as a speaker, when you're in a room, observe the room. Like the garden, there's a lot of flowers, but is there one flower that stands out? And if so, what about it stands out to you? And you might see a lot more than's actually there. Maybe it's more than just a garden. Maybe it's more than just a room of people you're speaking to, but a specific goal or idea.
I like that. Focusing on that one thing. And it is funny how focusing on one thing ends up opening up so many things after that. So I like that message a lot. Well, Shelly, if people want to follow you, get to know you more, see what you have going on, where's the best place for them to do that?
Oh, wow. I have a lot of great resources on my website. So you can go to speakingresource.com. Of course, remarkablespeaking.com. It all goes to the same place. And you can
like it.
Find me there.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, y'all go and check that out. Shelly is a wealth of knowledge for sure. Make sure to give her some love there on her platforms there. I'm sure her social media links are there as well, so go follow those as well. And you all go out there and share your message, because your message matters.